Hey everyone! Today we are going to be making a meme generator app with React Native and Expo. In this app, we can type stuff into the top and bottom text boxes to make a basic meme. In the picture row below, we can also choose from a bunch of template pictures. If we want a custom meme, we can use the camera API to take a picture for us. Or if we want to select a picture from our image library, we can do that too. When we're done, we can upload the meme to Imager and share it with our friends. In order to get started, let's go to the snack site, which is snack.expo.dev. Once we're here, we should see a simple app. We can type some stuff and see the changes in the Web tab. This is what our app would look like if we shipped it to the web platform. Eventually, you're going to want to see your changes on your device. When we click the Devices tab, it tells us we need to download Expo Go from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Once we've got Expo Go, you can scan the QR code. It'll open up Expo Go with your app, and you can also make changes. We can also see our changes on the Android and iOS emulators too, but I generally recommend developing with Expo Go and the web platform because it's a lot faster. The first thing we want to do is implement a UI with two text boxes. In the video description, there is a link to the GitHub README for the step-by-step instructions. First, we are going to replace the existing styles with our own. If you've ever used CSS in web development, this is pretty much the same thing, except for React Native. You can look up what each of the properties do in the docs. For example, if we had some text and we wanted to change the font, we can see from the docs that we need to add the font family property to our styles. Our app isn't compiling anymore, and when we look at the red error screen, it says that screen width is not defined. In order to get screen width, we need to use the Dimensions API. From the docs, it shows us that if we call the get method, we can get the screen height and width. Alright, so back to our Stack app. We can import the Dimensions API in the top section, and then we can get the screen width. The width variable is kind of ambiguous, so we're going to name it screen width instead. Now we're going to want to put in some text inputs. Let's import it and put it into our view. We want to be able to type in some text and have that show up at the bottom. Something that feels really intuitive to do is to define a variable called, say, top text. In the onChange handler, whenever the text changes, we can just assign it to top text. When I test this out on my phone, nothing is getting updated in the text input, even though I am typing stuff in. This is because even though the variable is changing, React has no idea when to re-render the text and text input elements. That's why it always says, hey, React doesn't know to update our screen even though our top text variable is changing. In order to get React to know when to re-render the UI elements, we need to use something called a state variable. The way we declare a state variable is by calling a function called useState. It'll give us back a pair of values. And the first thing it gives us is the current state variable, which we will name top text. The second thing it gives us is a setter function, which we will name setTopText. In our case, I'll set top text in the onChange text handler. This way, React knows to keep track of all the UI elements that are associated with our state variable. Whenever we change the value, React will know which UI components to re-render. Now, when we type stuff into the text input, we can see it updating, and that's how we know that React is properly re-rendering our component. In this app, we're going to need two text inputs, so I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before, except I'm going to call the state variable bottom text this time. If you want to try out the text inputs for yourself, feel free to scan in the QR code and try it out in Snack. Now that we've got some text inputs, we need a meme. Let's use the image API from the React Native library. For now, we'll hardcode it to the Doge meme. We'll also need to specify the height and width, so let's just make it square using our screen width dimensions we had before. Next, we'll apply some of our styles to the meme text. We'll give top text an offset of 5 pixels from the top, and we'll give bottom text an offset of 5 pixels from the bottom. Notice that these offsets are relative to the main view element. Ideally, we want the text to be on the Doge itself, and we want the offsets to be relative to the Doge image. To do this, we can wrap the Doge image in a view element and put the text inside. Now that we have a Doge meme, we'll want to give the user a bunch of other meme templates to choose from. First, let's paste in our list of meme templates. The next thing we're going to want to do is to stop hardcoding the Doge image. Instead, let's make a React state variable called image_URI. We can replace the hard-coded Doge with image_URI. Next, let's paste the snippet at the very bottom of our view. You can find the snippet in the workshop steps on GitHub. There's a couple things going on here, so let's unpack them one by one. First, we are taking each item in our meme array and making an image wrapped by a touchable opacity. So this means that every time we press on a template image, we set the image URI. This is what allows us to update our main meme image. If you want to try out the meme templates, scan the QR code and try it out on your device. So in this section, we'll want to give our users the option to take their own meme photo. And it'll be easier to split up all this logic if we had it in a different file. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to go over to the components folder, and then we're going to make a new file. And we're going to call it take photo button. So in this file, what we're going to want to do is we're going to define the main function. We're going to export the default function. We're going to call it take photo button. And our parentheses and our curly braces. And what we're going to do is we're just going to export a dummy button. The way we're going to do that is we're going to return just a simple button element. So we're going to say return button, close the tag, and it tells us that button is not defined. So we're going to go up here and we're going to import a button from the React Native library. All right, so now everything's compiling. And what we can do is we can put it into our main file. We're going to go back into app.js, and we're going to put the button between the main meme image and the template. So right about here. Right. And in order to do that, we need to import our component. So we're going to say import the take photo button from, and we're going to write the relative path. So it's going to be component / take photo button. So down here, we're going to declare our take photo button element, put in our closing tag, and it says here React is not defined. So it says React is not defined at the take photo button. And it looks like we need to import React into our namespace in order for this to work. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Import star as React from the React library. Right, so now we see a smidgen of a button, but it doesn't really say anything. So we'll give it a title by defining in the title field that we want it to say take a photo. Oops. All right, so now that we've got the button, we want the button to do something. And in particular, we want a function to run whenever we press the button. So to do that, we're going to define the onPress field, and we're going to put it in our curly braces, tell it that we're going to run some JavaScript code. And we're going to say that every time that we press this button, please run the take photo async function. All right. And then now we're going to go down here and we're going to define, async function, take photo async. All right, add our parentheses and curly braces. And just to check that this is all working, we're just gonna print an alert that says hello. So every time when we press take a photo, we know that this is indeed getting plumbed down. Okay. So now let's start implementing the function itself. Every time we press this button, we want to launch the camera and let the user take a photo so that we can replace the big meme image with whatever they took. And the package we're going to use to accomplish that today is the image picker. And the image picker is an API that Expo provides that allows easy access to the system's image library as well as the camera. And the function that speaks out the most here is launch camera async. So as we expect, it displays the system UI for taking a photo with the camera. But interestingly, it requires camera permissions. And you've probably seen that in a lot of apps that you've used whenever you want to use the camera or the microphone. It explicitly asks you, hey, do you want to let this app have permissions to whatever you want to use? So in order to get permissions, we see that there's another method called request camera permissions async. And that seems incredibly useful. So right here it says that it's going to ask the user to grant permissions for accessing the camera. And this sounds like exactly what we need. It returns a promise that resolves to an object of type camera permission response. All right, so the camera permission response is basically this thing right here. It's this object of type permission response. And fields that we care about is the status. So by the time the user answers, we'll have figured out whether a status is granted, denied, or undetermined. And also, there's the granted field name, which is a Boolean. And we're going to use these fields to implement what we need. So going back to our meme generator, we're going to say request camera permission. So we're going to call up to the image picker, and we're going to say request camera permissions. Oops, async. All right, and because it returns a promise, we're going to await it. There's also, it returns an object with a status field. So we're going to destructure that object, and we're going to extract the status field like this. Okay. So now that we've been able to get the status field, we want to know if the call was successful. So we're going to define something called is successful. And if the call was successful, then the status would be equal to the granted string. All right. Now, if we ask the user, hey, do you want to give us permissions to your app? And they said no, there's not really much we can do. So we can say that if we weren't successful, we'll just print something helpful out to the user to tell them what's going on. Oops, this is all uppercase here. So we'll say, hey, the camera permissions are not granted. And then after that, we'll just return. Okay, so moving on, if we were successful, let's call out to the image picker. We'll just define this variable to be image. And we're going to await a promise called launch camera async. All right. So what we're doing is we're calling out to the image picker library, and we're asking to launch the camera. This returns a promise, which we're going to await, and we're going to store it in our image variable. All right. So looking at what this returns, there is the launch camera async method. And we can see that it returns an object with the canceled field and the URI field. So this is really helpful because we want to know if the user ended up taking the picture. And if they did, we can extract the URI from it. So what we can do is we can say if the image was not canceled, all right, we're gonna do something with the URI field because that's what we need. And when we go back into our app.js, we can see that whenever we have a URI, we're calling setImageURI and passing it in. And it'd be really helpful if we were able to pass the setImageURI function into our component. So the way we're going to do that is through React properties. So what we're going to do is in our take photo button component, we're going to define the setImageURI property, which is something we just made up. And we're going to pass in this function called setImageURI. All right. Now, in order to receive this, we're going to go into our take photo button, and we're going to destructure the object and take out the setImageURI field. All right. So once we have that, we're going to take setImageURI and we're going to pass it into take photo async. And we're going to receive that right here in our parameters list. And that will allow us to call setImageURI with the URI field. So now we're able to set it properly. So now let's look at our errors that we're getting. And of course, we didn't define image picker yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to import it at the top, import star as image picker from Expo image picker. Okay, so this is the image picker library that it says, hey, we don't have it in our dependencies. So we're going to go into our package.json file and we're going to bring in this library. So we're going to say that we want the Expo image picker, and we also have to declare the version. So we're going to look up npm, which is our package manager, and we're going to see what the latest version is for the image picker. And we can see here that it's version 10.2.2. All right, so going back here, we're going to put the version in. And not only that, but we're going to prefix it with a tilde. So it's basically saying, hey, we want version 10.2.2, but if you have any bug fixes, so if the Expo authors have published a bug fix which increments this last number here, take the most recent patch version instead. So we're getting 10.2.2, but we're going to get a more recent package if they were minor fixes like bugs. And then when we look at the problems, we see still that the image picker requires a peer dependency, which is Expo permissions. So we're going to go ahead and bring that in as well. And then we're going to look up the most recent version, which is Expo permissions, which is 12.1.1. So we're going to go back, preface it with our tilde, and we're going to bring that in. So everything looks good so far. All right. And now we can see this working end to end. We'll press take a photo, and on web, this doesn't exactly translate to the camera, but we can see it translating on our device. If you'd like to try the camera functionality, you can scan in this QR code. So in this section, we want to have the users to be able to choose a photo from their image library and set it to be their meme photo. In order to do that, we're going to define a new component called ChoosePhotoButton. So ChoosePhotoButton.js. And to be honest, it's going to look a lot like our Take Photo button. So we're going to copy and paste this stuff into our file. Instead of exporting the Take Photo Button function, we're going to call it ChoosePhotoButton. And instead of the button title being called Take a Photo, we want it to say Choose a Photo. Whenever we press the button, instead of having the Take Photo async function run, we want it to run ChoosePhotoAsync. And similarly, we're going to rename it here. So intuitively, we know that we're no longer going to be wanting to request camera permissions. So let's take a look at the docs to see what kind of permissions we need to request this time. So in our image picker, let's take a look at this function called request media library permissions. All right, so it asks the user to grant permissions for accessing the user's photo. And it returns a promise that resolves to a media library permission response. So when we scroll down, we can see that it's quite similar to the camera permission response type. So it says that it extends the permission response type. So that means it has the exact same fields, but it also has this additional field called access privileges. And this doesn't really apply to us. So for our purposes, we can just treat it the same as the permission response type, which has all the same fields as we had before. So we don't really need to change anything except our function call, which is request media library permissions async. All right, and if it wasn't successful, we can say media permissions not granted. So now here we have the image picker calling launch camera async. And we know that we don't want to launch a camera, we want to launch the media library. So back to the docs we go, and we're going to look at this function called not get media library permissions, but launch image library async. Okay, so reading the documentation, it does everything we expect it to. And let's take a look at the fields it requires. So one field that it requires is the media types. And when we look at the options that are available to us, we see that we can have users choose images only, videos only, or both. And it seems like a good idea to allow people to choose both types of media. And the second field we want to set is allows editing. So whenever somebody chooses a photo, we want to be able to have them crop or rotate the image or however they see fit. And the last property we want to set is the aspect or the aspect ratio. So the memes that we've been making were square. And in order to keep that consistent, we'd want to pass in an array that is basically a 1:1, specifying that we want it to be a 1:1 aspect ratio. And this method also returns something very similar to launch camera async. It's got our familiar canceled field and our URI field. So when we go back to the meme generator, instead of calling out to launch camera async, we want to call launch image library async. And for the properties we talked about, we want to allow both media types. So we're going to call out to the media type options enumerator, and it gives us the options for all. Okay. And the next thing we want to do is we want allows editing to be true. So this allows people to crop and rotate their pictures when they choose it. And then we want the aspect ratio to be a square. So that's going to be a 1:1. Oops. Okay, I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. All right. So now we want to put this into our main app. So we're going to go into app.js and we're going to import our choose photo button, just like we did for our take photo button. So we're going to import the choose photo button from our relative path. And now we're going to put this button right below our take photo button. So choose photo button, we're going to set our image URI property to our set image URI function. And we're going to close this brace. All right, so now we've got the choose photo functionality and we can see it working here. This is the web equivalent, and it'll open our image library on our phone when we try it on a device. If you want to try out the image library, scan in this QR code. In this section, we'd like to take our meme view and convert it into a PNG to share with our friends. So let's take a step back for a second and think about what we need to do in order for this to work. First, we'll need a view with the Doge pic in it. Let's call it Doge view. We want to pass Doge view into some function and get a PNG out of it. But in order to do that, we need to figure out a way to reference this view object. The way we do this in React is to call a function called useRef. At the beginning, it'll give us some object with the field called current. It won't be set to anything yet. The next thing we want to do is to set the ref property on the view we want to turn into a PNG. In this case, we want to set it to meme view. When we do this, our meme view object will have its current properties set to the view we want. And now we can reference it with memeview.current. So in this section, we're going to be wanting to implement the share photo button. What this will allow us to do is it'll convert our meme view into a PNG, it'll upload it to Imager, and then it'll allow us to share it with our friends. Since it's going to look a little bit similar to our previous components, I've already put some boilerplate up. What we're going to do is in the share photo button component, we're going to export a button that will say share meme, and every time when we press it, the share async function is going to run. And in our case, what we want to use today is the React Native ViewShot package, and we're going to be using the captureRef method. So let's take a look at the docs to see what exactly it does. All right, so in the React Native ViewShot, what it does is it takes a React Native view and converts it to an image. If we scroll down to the captureRef method, you can see that it takes in a view, and then we can specify a variety of options. So for example, we can say we want the format to be PNG, and we can probably specify the quality to be lower since we don't want a huge PNG. And in the result type, we want to say that we want a data URI because that's the format that we're familiar with in our app. All right, so what our code is going to look like is we're going to want to define a constant called image URI. CaptureRef returns a promise, so we're going to await it. Let's say await captureRef. And then we're going to want to pass in our meme view that we haven't defined yet, but we will in a second. And we want the format to be PNG. The quality we're going to arbitrarily set to 0.5. And the result we wanted to be a data URI. Oops. All right, so we want to plumb the meme view up through React prop. So we're going to put it in our parameter. And we want it to be passed into the share photo button property. So let's go to our app.js file to see how exactly we're going to do that. All right. So in our app.js file, we're going to define a constant called meme view. And as we discussed before, we're going to be calling out to the React use ref function, which will return us an object with a current property that's set to undefined for now. We're going to go down to the view we want to convert to a PNG. So it's going to be this one right here. And we're going to set its ref property to meme view. So whenever this view renders, it's going to update meme view's current property to be this view. All right. And the other thing we want to do is we want to look at the collapsible property in a view. So in React Native, if it detects that we don't really need a view, say if it detected that we were only using it for layout purposes, it's going to remove it from the native hierarchy. And it primarily does this as an optimization. And in our case, that would be pretty bad because we have a reference to this view. We don't want it to be optimized away. So just in case, we're going to set the collapsible property to false. Oops. All right. So now that we've got meme view all set up, we're going to import our share photo button. As usual, we're going to import it from the top, share photo button from the relative path. And we're going to put it below all our other buttons. So share photo button, and then we're gonna pass in our meme view property And we're gonna set that to the reference we just defined. And there we have it. We've plumbed in our meme view into our share photo button component. So now that we've been able to convert our meme view into a PNG, the next thing we're going to want to do is upload the PNG to Imager, get the URL back, and then share it with our friends. So the next bit is quite involved, so what I'm going to do is go to our workshop README, and in the share photo section, I'm going to copy and paste the full share async implementation. So I'm going to copy this bit here, and I'm going to replace our share async function with the full thing. So let's take a look at what's going on here. As usual, we're passing in our meme view. And remember that this is the ref that we made. So it's going to have a current property. If for some reason the meme view isn't rendered yet, the current property will be undefined. And at that point, we can't really do anything. So we'll tell the user, hey, the meme view isn't rendered yet, we can't share right now. And then we're going to return. All right, so if the meme view has been rendered, we can continue on and we can get our PNG. Once we've gotten our PNG, we can upload it to the Imager server. So we're passing it into the upload image async function. So let's take a look at what's happening there. So in upload image async, we're using this thing called a form data. So you can see we're appending a bunch of key values. So let's take a look at the docs to see what exactly form data does. So form data is part of the JavaScript Web API, and it's also available in React Native for us to use. It lets us make a set of key value pairs from our data and send it using an HTTP request to the server of our choice. So once we've prepared our data using form data, what we can do is call out to the fetch API. So we're going to be calling out to the Imager servers. And let's also take a look at what the fetch API does. So similar to form data, it's part of the web API and is also available in React Native. So it lets us construct an HTTP request, and it gives us like an easy way to set headers and such. So going back to our app, we're calling out to the fetch API, we're doing an HTTP post, we've formatted our data with the form data, so we're passing that into the body, and in the headers, we've specified our authorization key that we got from Imager. So once we call out to Imager, Imager is going to return us a URL that links to their site with our image. So what we're going to do here is we wait on their response, and then after that, we extract out the URL that Imager has given us. And that's what we ultimately return in our function. So back to share async. Once we've uploaded the image to Imager and we've gotten the URL back, we can use the React Native share library and share this URL with our friends. Putting this all together, here's what our share functionality would look like. To try out this app end to end, scan in this QR code. If you like a challenge, we have a Meme 2.0 app for you to make. The details are in the video description below, and the first N people to submit to doge@expo.dev will get a mystery prize.